Hello, everyone. My name is Emily. If you don't know me already, I'm one of the program coordinators for the virtual challenge for Die for Ag. We are so excited that you are a team and you have chosen to participate. We're excited to see where your imagination takes you. This evening, we're talking with our horse expert, Wendy Hine, and she will be here to answer any questions you may have about horses or how horses might interact with your life or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Wendy, and she's going to talk for a bit. If you do have any questions, if you're live, please put them in the Q&A box at any time. If you're watching this as a recording, you are welcome to email us dieforag@oregonstate.edu, and we will make sure that Wendy is able to answer those because we want to make sure that all of your questions are answered so your apps that you create are as best as they can be. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Wendy, and take it away.
Thanks, Emily. I'm so excited to be joining everyone today to talk more about horses and the Dive for Ag horse app. So maybe a little bit about me, first of all. Um, I am I was one of those kids growing up who always loved horses, even, like at age 2 and 3, loved my horse toys, that kind of thing. But never really imagined a place for myself in the horse industry. Um, just living in the city, it just didn't seem like a really like that would ever be something I'd have an opportunity to do. Um, but I'm glad to tell you that I was mistaken in that there are in fact lots of ways to get involved in the horse industry. And one of the people who opened doors for me is still a good friend. Her name is Lynn. She's a friend of my mom's as well. And she told my mom, "Well, if your daughter likes horses that much, you really should just get her one." Well, I mean, that's easier said than done. Let me tell you, I had many years of adventures, um, keeping and trying different horses. Um, but it is something that made an absolute, huge change in my life. So just checking, Emily, can you see the picture of me and that's my first county fair.
I can, yes.
So it's little Wendy, and that horse's name is Abby. Um, she actually wasn't my first horse. My horse got sick right before county fair, and a friend loaned me this horse, Abby. Um, and so this is my very first 4-H fair. And so both 4-H as an experience and also the opportunity to be with horses has just been transformational for me. So again, the first thing I want to tell you is that just because you might think to yourself, well, I could never own a horse myself, or maybe that's not even what your interest in horses is about, that's not a reason to just ignore the whole horse industry. There's just so many um, amazing connections you can make with horses. Um, so yeah, so that's a little bit about how I got started in horses, and I'm so excited that as a career now, as a 4-H faculty member with the OSU Extension Service, that one of the things I get to do is still work with horses. So I oversee 4-H youth development programs in Clackamas County, and we have about 200 youth who are enrolled in horse programs year round, just in this county alone. And we are also, always thinking of new ways that we can get youth involved in horses. Um, if you are able to work directly with horses, I can tell you there's some astounding things that research has found about the benefits of the connecting that we do with animals, including horses. Um, it's just such a powerful way of learning about yourself, as well as just a great activity and fantastic way to get physical fitness in your life. So the horse app, I just, again, I'm so passionate about this idea of horses, and that we can all learn something about horses from horses, and potentially apply it in different professional situations. So the app is meant to be just a bit of an introduction to people who have probably no familiarity with horses. Maybe you've found a pony ride at a zoo or something like that once. Um, Maybe a family member had a horse that you got to pet a few times. But for the most part, the app assumes that you don't have a lot of experience with horses and tries to cover a little bit of everything. So you'll find some things in there about horse history, for example, right? Um, Horses have been domesticated for thousands of years. Some things a lot of people don't know is that they weren't first ridden. They were actually first domesticated as a meat source. And horses still feed people around the world today. That's not the most common use anymore, but it's true. And it was later that horses were trained to pull things, and then even later that we learned to ride horses. But the point where horses started being ridden and they were hooked to especially wheeled carts, the world changed. The entire world changed. It opened up transportation lines across Europe and Asia, um, and facilitated trade, intercultural exchange. I mean, there's all fields of social science can see impact from horses. You see language, words jumping thousands of miles because horse transportation is a thing now. So there's just a little bit about history in the app, but that could be something um, that people might want to expand upon. Is a little bit more about that history and the huge impact of horses on society. Um, I mentioned, a little bit about the personal benefits of being involved with horses, about how there's research showing that being around horses can decrease stress levels, like the actual stress hormones in your blood decrease from time spent with horses. So that's another example of something that could be delved into a little more is why does that work? There are horse therapy programs that take advantage both of the stress lowering and also sometimes the physical fitness. There are therapy programs aimed at um, people with like muscle diseases or paralytic kinds of conditions that help them build core strength. There are therapeutic things aimed at incarcerated people because not only do they learn a marketable skill about training horses, but the benefits of working with the horse are just have a huge impact on mental health and the challenges people face if they're incarcerated. So, just some other really neat things that we find horses out there doing today, even though by and large in our city streets, they have been replaced with the Prius. Um, Other fun things in the app, there's just so many different ways that people enjoy horses. So horses for pleasure and for sport are still big industries. And that can include people who to have a horse in their backyard, or they boarded at a nearby stable and they ride basically just for fun. I mean, they may have goals and they're going to train and work with their horse, um, but the goals are mostly personal. It's about spending time with the horse and their friends at the barn, getting outside, things like that. There are also people with competitive goals with horses. Horses are amazing athletes. And I hope that in the app, you'll take some time to look at especially the 3D video ride-alongs. Those were amazing, weren't they, Emily? Yeah, those in particular show you some of the athleticism we're talking about. You can see the example of the horse helping to rope the cow. You'll see the reining horse in training. You'll see our youth rider doing some dressage maneuvers. So there's lots of different things that horses can do athletically. And just like in humans, we don't have like one human sport. We've got hundreds. Same with horses. So depending on the horse's unique talents, you can aim in different directions in sport. So there's a fair amount of points about that. And then a lot of the points also just deal with general, what we would call horse husbandry or care for horses. What do they eat? We talk a little bit about horse hooves and chewing. Horse hooves grow continuously like fingernails, and so they require regular maintenance. So if you've ever, wondered about that, or why do we shoe horses? It helps protect their hooves. So there's some great information about just the day-to-day work it takes to keep up on a horse. So lots of fun things, lots of different directions to go in that app. So let's see, other ideas, things that could be explored more. You certainly could dive into more of those horse care. Any one of those horse care tips you could expand upon. You could tell us more about different feeds for horses. You could tell us more about breeding horses. You could pick a particular horse sport that you're interested in, right? Maybe you love to watch horse racing on TV or a rodeo. Show jumping is on TV a lot. Olympic sports, right? You could look into that more and tell us more about a specific horse sporting event that you're interested in. And then one more thing I want to mention, we didn't get a lot of in the app, so this might be something really fun to add, is looking at the horse in literature. So there are so many quotes from Shakespeare, for example, just one author example about horses. There are poems about horses. There are entire novels about horses, including some great American classics like Smokey the Cowhorse, um, Black Beauty, right? That was revolutionary in England and started really getting people thinking more about horse welfare. So these might be books you've read, maybe you haven't, but there are some really classic works of literature that you might enjoy. They might be more modern. One of the more modern books I read and loved was called Horse Heaven by Jane Smiley. She's actually a Pulitzer Prize winning author, but she's also a horse lover, and her horse books are absolutely like my favorite. Um, or you could again look back at Shakespeare or even earlier writers to see what is being said about horses. You'll find references related to horses in the Bible and in the Quran. I mean, they're just everywhere. You'll find art about horses, pictures, sculptures. Degas sculptures are some of, I think, the most amazing horse sculptures out there. So many things in arts and literature that could be explored as well. So those were just some of my ideas. I'm sure that many of you will have, even more thoughts as to where you might head with horses. And my hope again is that maybe by looking at the app, maybe you'll discover that you've had this lifelong passion for horses and you're going to dive on in. And maybe not, but you might at least realize that horses do play an active role in society today. They're an important part of agriculture in the U.S.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy. We are going to pause for just a moment. If we do have any questions, please put them in that Q&A section. And these could be questions about horses in general that you're just curious about, or maybe about a particular part of the app that you've looked at, or this is your time to ask any questions you may have. And while those come in, I would just like to hear kind of what's your favorite part about interacting with horses, Wendy?
My favorite part. Wow, so many different things I've done with horses that have been a highlight. But my favorite thing to do is really just to go to the barn with a friend and hang out together with the horses. And we might or might not even get around to riding, but we chat and we groom the horses and we do the barn chores. And I'm someone who notices and tends to remember like smells. Like there are certain smells that just like, oh, that feels good, right? And barn smells for me are one of those. uh, the best thing, it's like therapy.
Do you have any suggestions for, a youth that lives in the middle of a city and definitely cannot own a horse but loves horses? What do you suggest that they look into? Kind of how to can they get involved with horses when it's not possible to get one?
Gotcha. So, several options. First of all, again, like in my story, I had assumed that getting a horse was just never going to happen for me. And it turned out to be more possible than I thought. So it could be something that is more possible than you think, or with some planning, like it could be a future goal. But owning a horse is not where you need to start. It just isn't. So some things to do are you can look for barns with riding programs. Um, for our area, you know, Google searches are a good bet. Word of mouth if you can find someone who does ride. And I recommend, maybe checking some references or taking just one or two sample lessons before you commit. There's lots of different people out there. Most of them are pretty good. A few are maybe not as great. I know that some of the barns that do lessons will do things like have a spring break camp or summer camp sessions, like day camp sort of thing. That might be something you can um, talk to your um, parents or guardians about. Hey, is this something we could make happen as a horsey camp? Some overnight camps also do horses. I haven't heard if any of our summer 4-H camps are going to have horses this year or not, but sometimes they do. That might be worth checking the 4-H Wild West camp at the 4-H center. They usually do have an option to do a horse track, and you'd get to ride probably 2 or 3 times during the week. So those can be ways to just at least get open to horses. If you are someone who would benefit from horse therapy, either for mental health and stress reasons or physical health reasons, you might inquire with your doctor to see if that's something that they recommend. I am not an expert on the costs of those programs, but if you qualified, it's possible that might be a more affordable way to regularly engage with horses. So that could be something to try. And if you do connect with like say a riding program, you can always inquire with them about like where could you go from here? Are there options to do barn work like stall cleaning to help offset some of the lesson charges, etc. Now with 4-H, we have a number of people who come to us who've never had horse experience. Basically, their parents call us and say, "My kid loves horses. Can you help?" And we are happy to match up young people with horse clubs. I will say that most of them do meet at barns, so transportation is probably still something you'd need to think about. And you don't have to own a horse to be involved with 4-H. There are other opportunities that we offer, like horse knowledge contests and things like that. A lot of our members, especially our first year members, it's at least a quarter of our first year or members lease a horse. So it's kind of like renting a horse for like on a month by month basis instead of owning it outright. And that can be an easier way to get into horses, like riding, regular riding. Other things to do. There are horse shows at several venues around town. The Clark County Fairgrounds in Vancouver has a fair number of horse shows. The Clackamas County Fairgrounds in Canby, Yamhill County Fairgrounds in McMinnville. There's a equestrian center out in Boring. Those are probably the closest by ones that regularly have horse shows. And the vast majority of them are smaller shows and are free. So you can just head on out there and enjoy watching shows for the day and wander the barns and chat with people. And for a shorter term experience, there's a Northwest Horse Expo coming up March, it's like the 24th through 26th, I think, and that's down in Lynn County, Albany. And for the daily admission, you get to see horse demonstrations throughout the day, wander the barns, and there's an exhibit area. So those are some ways to learn a little bit more about horses or have some contacts without taking the deep dive right into ownership.
Thank you. We'll pause here if anyone has any questions about horses or maybe about the horse app.
I will say one thing that I really miss is Portland used to have a mounted patrol. They completely stopped funding it a few years ago, unfortunately. But I remember, growing up, you used to see the horses at like parade events and things like that. So sadly, that was one of the last sort of inner city options to see horses. Yeah. And I don't think we have any carriage companies like that are serving downtown right now. So,
Hmm. Excellent. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, which I don't see anything popping up in the Q&A sections. Definitely don't want to keep you here longer than needed. Want to make sure that our live participants have plenty of time to ask those questions. For everyone that is visiting live, if you liked something Wendy said and you forgot to write it down, just remember that it is recorded and it will be on the Die4Ag website where you found the link to join us. So it will be there hopefully tonight, possibly tomorrow. And if you do have any other questions that pop up about horses, if you want to go through the horse app and have that one burning question, please send it to us, die4ag@oregonstate.edu, and we would be happy to answer it for you. And with that, I think we'll call it. So Wendy, thank you so much for joining us again today. And we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
great. Yeah, happy to be here and happy to answer any horsey questions.
Thanks, Wendy.
You bet.
We're excited to see what you come up with. So keep in touch. Thanks, everyone.